grid itself, you can think of it as a marketplace where electricity is bought and sold. It simply houses the electricity. It's a place for the electricity to be stored. As for why you can't sort of delegate that electricity to only be used in Keene Township. Keene electricity takes the path of least resistance, so it may be used here. It may be used someplace else, just like this electricity may have come from someplace else. You can't mark individual electrons to say, I know exactly where that electron came from, and I know exactly where it's going. Again, once it's on the grid, it's kind of like a water main. It's just always pressured, and then when you turn that tap and you need it, it's there. So again, there's no way to say that it's not being used in Keene Township, and there's also no way to say that it can or can't be used in Keene Township. So I hope that answers your question. Kind of. It might not have been the answer you were hoping for, to say yes, we can keep it here.
I just don't understand, if you're getting it for free, somebody's got to pay for it. Why can't I just take my house and plug into the solar and get my electricity for free?
I don't know if there's, Charles, do you want to talk about the...
Well, you can if you have a solar array a solar system that is sized appropriately for your house or your barn or whatever. It's just not feasible for us to, or for
Just to plug your cord in to get electricity.
yeah.
You're gonna have to charge for this somehow, right? If you're gonna put up these big solar arrays, who's paying for it?
Yeah. So, obviously, and again, I don't know if it's obvious, but the way I look at it, if you're buying electricity from consumers or DTE or whoever, the bill that you pay is paying for this electricity. It's all one, and I think they blend it into a big pot, price it out, and you buy it by the kilowatt hour. I mean, that's kind of how I look at it. And again, I'm not a technical guy, but that kind of makes sense to me, so. Wait, so I want to say this too. So kind of the idea was to have the questions in ahead of time. Don't stump the panel type thing. We want to try to answer as many questions, not show how we can get stumped a lot. So saying that, I'm going to kind of limit it to the question asked to what's on the screen. Before we go on to the next slide, you think we got a point across as far as how the electricity goes around? You feel comfortable with that?
That's the best way to answer.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Something else on that slide today.
It's going to be in energy mostly. So the other question that would be, there's two questions that I'm going to just speak to, but don't say that I'm the, as far as I know on this project, and I want to say this too, this project, if it goes through, is so early in the development stage. There's a lot of questions that were asked about this construction layout and stuff. It's just way too early. There's not that part of the project, okay? So there's a question about batteries. My understanding is there will be no batteries to store. It's going to go right on the line, okay? And then how would the electricity get to the power lines? It's either going to be buried underground or it's going to go overhead. And I can't speak to the why one, why over the other, but you know, kind of like it is now. So yeah, I think that handles that first screen pretty good. I think we'll go on to the next one if you can. Okay, so this is the construction maintenance portion of it. There's a lot of questions on that too. I'm gonna hope that you can help me out on this some too. I'm gonna take the first two, kind of like I had mentioned earlier. If this project goes through, it's way too early in the plan to be able to talk about any of that. Impact on the township roads. I kind of feel like if these trucks and equipment are loaded legally, it wouldn't be any different than the other construction homes, you know, with these cement trucks or lumber delivery, that kind of thing. So I feel like, You know, again, as long as everything is legally loaded, it shouldn't be an issue. Might be a little traffic, back up, but our gravel roads aren't that busy. So explain the test period and what they're looking for. And, my skills on PowerPoint aren't that good. I did have a picture, but I wasn't clever enough to put it on for you. So my understanding with the test period is, they have a small panels, and I have some notes on it. The panel is about 4 to 6 feet wide. It's just gonna be a single panel, and it's gonna be, fenced in, and they're going to, just see how much electricity, is produced in Keene Township, or at least this year, or whenever they do it. As far as the time frame, I don't have any idea when that's gonna happen either, to kind of help that out. So I will say that it's not gonna be a big old line of grids or whatever, like you would think. It sounds like it's just a single 4x6, panel. So, the ordinance, okay, this is another question. The ordinance states maximum height allowed is 6 feet, but it does not specify what type of fencing. So again, same thing, when they come to and we'll get into the process in a little bit, but when they come to the planning commission to bring the special use permit in, all those questions will be answered. As far as from what the township is saying, we set some parameters, some guidelines, or ordinances. 6 feet is that, and then there's screening and other things go with it too. So I don't want to get too much into that, but that would answer that question. So yeah, mostly to be determined, but there's a little bit of information that we know. Okay, so maintenance. I'm going to get some help on this because I think we talked a little bit about sheep and lettuce and stuff. So I'm actually going to hand this off to you, Merrill, and you can see if you can walk us through this.
Okay, so the first question is, how will the solar panels and grounds be maintained? Well, this is a very timely question because, I don't know, the sunlight probably has really shown my sunburned face. I was on a tour today, compliments of the Michigan Association of Planners. So there's a lot of township officials who just wanted to learn more about wind and solar. And so this morning we visited a wind site in Isabella County. And then this afternoon we visited Assembly 1, 2, and 3, which was put up by Ranger Power. 1,200 acre site, 239 kilowatts of solar being put out on the grid. That particular project is producing half of all the solar power generation in the state of Michigan. And so we actually were able to see how they were doing their maintenance. So in terms of the solar panels, in Michigan, you don't need to wash solar panels. We have precipitation, and it does a adequate job of keeping the solar modules clean. Dust is really not an issue. Dust is an issue like in Arizona or somewhere out west where it's more dusty. When we were there, if you can picture in your mind a bobcat with instead of a bucket, they have like a bush hog attachment, and they were just whizzing up in between the rows with this mower attached to the bobcat, just mowing the vegetation. When we got out and we were able to walk around between the solar arrays, the vegetation was probably up to my thigh. This was the second year of planting. They had what looked like a mix of some grasses and various types of clover. There were some weeds that had come in, and they have a management plan to deal with those weeds. So, and I would say in terms of the fencing, just jumping back to this, I've seen a number of different types of fencing. It's really, the ordinance is what dictates the fencing, but there's some latitude, at least it appears to me. The fencing that we saw at the assembly site was 7 feet tall, and that's dictated by the National Electric Code. So there's two options the township can take. They can do a 6-foot fence with a row of barbed wire on the top, so it looks like a penitentiary, or they can go 7 feet with no barbed wire on it, but I want to say it's woven wire, but that doesn't sound right. But it would be a fencing. Chain link is one of the options. I have seen that. There's a 14-acre solar project in Ottawa County where I'm from that has chain link fence. This was not chain link fence, but it was very attractive. It looked nice. What would happen if a drain tile under a solar field needs to be repaired? Part of this 1,200-acre site included land that was enrolled in PA 116, and the land in PA 116 had drainage tile in it, and so the drainage tile was mapped out, and the solar arrays were put where the solar tile, or where the drainage tile would not. That's really important because that's part of PA 116. When developers go in, they have to know where that field tile is. They cannot break it. If they break it, they replace it. Who would be responsible for covering the cost of tile repair? Well, it's the solar developers that covers the cost of the tile repair. How will the area inside the fence be maintained? I think I answered that. One thing that I will tell you is I have had discussions with Ranger Power, I guess about 3 weeks ago. Sean and Drew, they're very interested in putting sheep in. The problem that we have in Michigan, and there's some real opportunities with farmers, and if there's some farmers out here that want to visit with me a little bit more about this, I'd really love to have a conversation with you. So the rule of thumb is 3 ewes per acre. We have 87,000 head of sheep in Michigan. We right now, we are at equilibrium in terms of the land that we have for grazing purposes. So what a lot of sheep producers want to do is they want to graze the solar sites so they can hay their pastures. Then they use that in the wintertime when they take the sheep off the solar arrays. So you can put it, you can put the sheep on 2 weeks ago or so. You keep them on into October, depending on weather. And if you use a good rotational grazing method, then you can keep them out there the whole summer. So what we need to do, and that's the point I was trying to make, is we need to build the number of sheep that we have in Michigan. And so if you're interested in talking with me about that, I'd really like that, to visit with you about that. Would the solar panels need to be cleaned regularly? I talked about that, how often, what would be used to clean them. It's going to be rain and snow that's going to do that. And then the last one, would Invenergy manage the solar farms, or would they sell it? I can't speak to that, but I can tell you that solar developers who retain ownership of their solar project seem to be better landowners. Is that a PC way of saying it? So,
All right, what's next? All right, this is a big question too. All right, 25 years from now, the solar's in and it's not going to be renewed, or it will be. Those are questions I don't know. But if it's not, so in the township ordinance we talk about bonding. So there's money set aside ahead of time for restoration. So the panels will all be taken down, disposed of, turn around. The property will be put back as it was. And again, it won't be funded post. The funding will be in place ahead of time, if that makes any sense. So that way, I think there's a bankruptcy question. Yeah, next one. What happens if the company that owns the project goes bankrupt? That money's bonded, so it's already there. So if there is trouble down the road, at least there's something. You know what I mean? It's not fly by the night, we're gone. Let me speak to that.
yeah, I just want to add another point here. So it used to be when solar arrays went in, that there was concrete as a footing. Well, they don't do concrete anymore. And so what they have is like a pile driver. And they just drive those posts, they're metal posts, into the ground. And they go in anywhere between 4 and 6 feet. And what they do is to make sure that things aren't heaving, that because of the winter, the posts aren't coming up and moving around. They inspect those arrays every year. So let's see, go back here. I want to make sure there was another point I was going to make here. Okay, the other point I was going to make is what a lot of townships are doing now is, a lot of things can change in 25 years. So they write into ordinance that like every 5 years they have a meeting with the solar developer or whoever owns the solar site, and they look at that bond, and they look at the price of solar modules, recycling the modules, and they look at the price of metal and things like that. And if they need to tweak that particular agreement, then they do. So every 5 years for the life of that lease agreement, they go back and renew that bond. There you go. That's what I'm trying to say.
All right, next we're gonna go to environmental concerns. So there's a couple questions that are very similar. One is the very first one, and then the one on the second from the bottom. Is there an environmental impact study being done? And why would we trust an environmental impact study if it's facilitated by Invergy? So my understanding is this. So part of the process to put these solar fields in, there's a review by EGLE. So that's Michigan Energy and Great Lakes.
Great Lakes and then.
Yep, there you go. So all this, they have to document everything, and then it's reviewed by the state of Michigan. So I feel like, I'm not gonna say it. So there's at least another set of eyes looking at what's going on as far as with these big companies. Okay. Some of these I'm gonna hand this back off. Solar panels disposed of. What are they made of? I have some information I'm going to share, but I know that.
Okay, so how are solar panels disposed of? This is something that the solar industry is actively working on. We know that's a concern. It's a concern from the public. It's a concern from the solar industry. And at Michigan State University, we have a number of researchers that are actively engaged in this. So what they're trying to do is first of all, figure out how you can after you dismantle a solar module, how you extract everything off of it, and then identifying markets for that. So what's happened now is as they extract the components out of the solar module, they go back into new solar modules. And so it's not quite a closed loop system, but that's the goal, is to get a closed loop system. At the end of their useful life, and solar modules today are like guaranteed for 40 years, even though the lease agreements are generally for like 25. So a module loses about 0.5% of its ability to produce electricity annually. So its efficiency of producing electricity is, it's designed to be efficient over the long term. But you know, after the end of the 25 year, you still got what, you know, over 80–85%, whatever that turns out to be, capacity to produce electricity. And so a lot of those used solar markets now are ending up in a secondary market for homeowners that want their own solar at a fraction of the cost. Because, you know, for a utility, you know, their business model is not built on something that is producing electricity at 85% efficiency. But for a homeowner, I mean, that's gold. So that's where a lot of these are ending up at. You know, some of them, unfortunately, are ending up in landfills. And again, just being transparent, that has to stop, and that's why there's such effort in you know, identifying alternative uses for solar panels. So what are they made of? They're made of silicon sand. That's the primary. You know, that's what takes the solar energy and converts it into electricity, and they're encased in glass. So, hazardous chemicals. There's a tiny fraction, just a tiny fraction of metals that are necessary for converting solar energy into electricity. They are encased within that glass. They are not going to leach out. That's one of the things that gets circulated around. That is not true. They are encased in glass, and they're not capable of leaching out. So let me give you an example here. In Ottawa County, because of our utilization of groundwater, we have sucked it down to the point where we're getting salty water. And so, those of you who know about Ottawa County, we grow a lot of blueberries over there, and that has an impact on blueberry production, as well as other crops. But our recharge area is in Isabella County. Okay, so I'm just taking that on the word of scientists. So what I would want to have happen as a citizen of Ottawa County is I would want a 2,000-acre solar project going in Isabella County where my recharge area is, because I know that there's not going to be any metals or carcinogens or anything like that go into the groundwater. That would be a perfect site to put a solar project in and a recharge area that's going to benefit me. And then, how would a cleanup be done? Not sure what that question is implying.
I think it's implying that if it was hazardous, you know, I think the question, and the way I read it is, if it is hazardous, you know, how would it be done? And
Okay.
I guess the point is that there's really not much that's hazardous about it.
Yeah, I think I would just leave it at that.
Okay, so there was a question on the bottom, talking about fire department, so I did get some information. This is gonna talk to fire departments and fire control, so I'm just gonna read it and go from there. The project owner will coordinate closely with local fire departments on implementing an emergency action plan to ensure local EMS personnel are trained and equipped to handle site related incident. During construction, general contractors are also required to have an emergency protocol in place. Implementing EPAs is not an added burden to local taxpayers. A significant portion of the project owner's tax obligations will fund the fire departments and EMS services. So that's as best I can answer that question. And I think that's true with other things. I know, I think they have here at the school, they have emergency action plan, the fire departments as well. There's another project going on in our township that when that methane digester is up and going, there's going to be a action plan for the fire department if something ever happens out there. I think that's kind of a standard, industry thing, so I just wanted to kind of, answer that best I could. Okay, so going on to the next, this one is the general questions portion. There were some good ones, I'll get it. So, probably the first one, and the one I probably saw the most was benefits. There was two to start with. What are the benefits to the landowners? What are the benefits to the township residents? Okay. So I did a little looking. With the landowners, I think it's pretty straightforward. It's a financial reward for them. And for whatever reason, I'm not, I can't answer the financial part of it. All I can say is that obviously they're leasing the ground and they're getting paid for it. The other part of it might be transition from one generation to the next. You know, I mean, all those things kind of weigh in. I think that still plays into the benefits, to the township residents. Okay, and I don't want to harp on money, but that's going to be part of it. These panels are going to be taxed. There's going to be money coming to the schools. There's going to be money going to the libraries. There's going to be money to the townships, to the county. It's all based on millage, okay? And at our last board meeting in June, I had some examples of what happened. A good example I'm gonna pick on is Gratiot County. There's a Greater Gratiot Development Organization that checks that stuff out. Since 2012, just under 71, just right around $72 million of extra tax revenue from those windmills. And again, I'm not taking sides, but I'm just telling you that Gratiot County, and then that's divided up between the townships and the schools and all that. So it wasn't just all went to the county. Saying that, you know, if you got a little extra money in your budget, hey, I think the people that live on a gravel road, we just grind it, so that's gonna be a plus. Maybe we can get it grind 2 or 3 times a year. You know, again, it all comes back to budget. I have to stay within my means. So if there's an increase in the township budget, that just makes the services, you know, we have fire service in the township. Hey, we're looking at a new truck in a couple of years. So all those things cost money. So that's a plus. That's part of it too. I hope you can add something to that.
Well, I guess I would, it's kind of like the tide. The tide comes in, it's going to raise all ships, right? So, in the long run, I think that farms who have, okay, so I guess let me put it maybe a different way. So we want to, I'm sorry, I got a lot of different thoughts. So I guess I'll say it like this. When we were at the solar site today, there was a farmer who was, you know, he had soybeans in the midst of all of the arrays, the pods of arrays. And the solar pods had to stay 50 feet away. There was a buffer of 50 feet from the drain that went through. But the farmer planted right up next to the drain itself. So, and I'm not trying to throw farmers underneath the bus at all. But what I'm saying is that the standard for solar, the land use, the ordinance that's developed for solar needs to be consistent with other land uses, other similar type of land uses. And I think that, you know, it's okay to identify places within Keene Township where solar doesn't go. It just doesn't fit. But then there are other places where solar does fit. And so, as you know, and that should be a public decision on where those things, you know, where they go in. I guess if I could be so bold. So, I guess guess where I'm getting to is if farmers with solar, you know, I'm sorry, I'm really struggling to make my point here. In Ottawa County, we see a lot of pressure from Grand Rapids. So Grand Rapids has come in, the people have bought up farmland. They have taken that land out of production. And so if we apply that same analogy to solar as taking ag land out of production, I think that, we have a double standard here, and we just need to, make sure that we're giving farmers a fair shake for the land that they have. Because as this gentleman pointed out, for many of them, that's their retirement. Profit margins have been so thin, and you guys that farm know that that's the case. Corn and soybean prices have been in the dump. Milk prices have been in the dump. Things are changing now. Prices are actually pretty good right at this point, but I think, I'm not sure I made my point, but I guess I'll stop right there.
The other thing that, is the elephant in the room is, hey, we all need electricity. If there's gonna be electric cars, so what's the benefits, to landowners, residents, same thing. There's gonna be more electricity than there was. I'll kind of leave it that way. That's just kind of the straightforward thing. So, we talked about decommissioning a little bit, and the question goes something like, if solar panels are decommissioned and the land returns to ag, will the crop yield and quality be what it is today?
So let's think about that for a minute. 25 years, it's been mowed, or it's had cattle or sheep on it, so you got the nutrient aspect there. I would think that, your soil organic matter would increase. This would be an opportunity to really implement some regenerative agriculture practices. In fact, that can be done during the lifespan of the solar array, and that's one of the things that as a university we're looking at. How do we implement regenerative agricultural practices in those solar arrays? I was talking with a farmer, a while ago, who said the reason that I want to put solar on my land is because I want to go organic, and I've applied, chemicals over, the life of that field. So having it sit for 25 years is going to benefit me because I want to go organic. And he was a young farmer, so